Hello, I'm Miss Marcy, and I'm the Education Coordinator for Starwood Schools. Today I'm talking to you about MAP assessments. We started utilizing MAP back in 2018. Prior to this time, we were utilizing a popular standardized test with our upper elementary students and testing them one time a year at the end of a school year. However, having MAP available allows us to gain greater data because we assess students throughout the school year and we can gain information to help guide our instruction. My role is to roster the students into the MAP system with each testing session, also to assist the guides with setting up these testing sessions and with proctoring, and to attend MAP webinars, workshops, and also assist our staff with getting training on MAP. So my objective in today's brief video is to help parents understand how and why Starwood Schools utilize MAP assessments and what the MAP Goal Worksheet is communicating to you about your child's academics. Most of us experienced through our own education assessments such as standardized testing or summative assessments, meaning we were tested at the end of the school year or perhaps at the end of a unit study or a session, and then we would receive a grade or a numerical value, and this grade was based on benchmarks or standards. In a Montessori learning environment, daily assessments are happening throughout, such as through internal assessments, work samples, classroom observations, student presentations, mentoring or peer lessons, and then at Starwood Schools, we utilize MAP assessments as one tool. The focus in a Montessori learning environment is for the child to develop lifelong learning skills and self-motivation and to have autonomy of their learning. Assessments are integrated throughout learning so that the pace and the lessons covered can be adjusted as needed. So I want you to think back to your own schooling. What feelings do you experience when you think back to your own participation in tests and getting test results? It likely consists of conventional testing or those summative assessments where the whole class took the same test. As Montessori guides, we are trained to identify and analyze our own experiences when we work with children, because it allows us to identify if we have any biases that could interfere with meeting a child's needs. So as parents, it's valuable to do the same. You want to identify any emotions that you feel when you start to think about taking tests. We often react to our children from a place of emotion based on our own personal history. So through our language and our actions, we pass along our opinions, our biases, our anxieties, and even more. In the classroom, this results in students saying things like, "My parents will be mad at me if I don't do well on this," or "I'm not good at taking tests," or they feel the need to compare with other peers about their test scores because it may validate them in some way. So at the end of this presentation about MAP assessments, I'm going to provide some guidance about having conversations with your child about MAP scores or MAP testing. First, it's important for you as the parent to understand how MAP is different than what you experienced as an elementary or a middle school student. MAP stands for Measuring Academic Progress. MAP assessments are developed by educators and researchers at NWEA, which is Northwest Evaluation Association. It's a not-for-profit organization that is utilized by over 3,500 different types of organizations worldwide. MAP recommends that students are assessed 3 times within a school year. So a traditional school year has 36 weeks. At Starwood schools, we tend to have 38 weeks. So you see on the screen the approximate weeks that we are doing our testing for fall, winter, and spring. During each testing window, a student completes an assessment in math and in reading. Each test takes about 30 to 45 minutes. However, a MAP assessment is not timed, and a student can take as long as needed to complete an assessment. In fact, a test can be suspended or even paused by the guide if the guide observes that the child is not engaged in the testing or is struggling that day to focus. Guides also have the freedom to administer MAP tests, either individually or in small groups or by the whole class. Students do not experience a high-stress testing dynamic where the whole class is tested at a given time and then students have to wait around for others to finish. The assessment for first year has audio support. So you see the picture of the student on the right has headphones. As they get more proficient with their reading, they're able to do the assessments without the audio support. The MAP growth test is a computer-based test that consists of multiple choice, drag and drop, or other types of questions. No 2 students are taking the same assessment. The test forms based on the answers provided by each student. And you see this in the diagram. So a baseline of questions is provided. If a child answers those questions correctly, the questions get harder. If they miss those questions, the questions get easier. The test is designed to pinpoint where the child's learning is. So the goal of a formative assessment is to monitor a student's learning, to provide feedback regarding what a student knows and what a student is ready to learn. It can identify areas where students need to review content and learning. So in this formative assessment, each student is experiencing a different assessment after baseline questions. So what happens in the pinpointing of figuring out what a child knows but is ready to learn, they get around 50% of the answers correct and 50% incorrect. The assessment is meant to show learning and growth patterns over a period of time and not to provide a one-time score of accomplishment. Remember, MAP is used 3 times a year and we look consecutively at years together over a period of time. Once a student has a MAP score, even if it is from a previous school year, the assessment begins where the student left off. So those baselines of questions are only asked at the very beginning when a child first starts MAP testing. And once a student does a MAP assessment, they are provided a RIT score. So let's look at what does RIT mean. MAP growth uses a RIT scale to accurately measure what students know regardless of their grade level. It also measures growth over time. It allows you to track your child's progress throughout the school year and across multiple years. The RIT scale helps to measure and compare academic growth. Specifically, the scale measures levels in academic difficulty. The RIT scale extends equally across all grades, making it possible to compare a student's score at various points throughout his or her education. The RIT score represents the level where a student is ready to learn, which is also known as the zone of proximal development. The test finds level by pinpointing where a student would just as likely answer incorrectly as correctly. And this is the point between knowing and not knowing answers. RIT scores have the same meaning across grade levels. So if the 4th grade student and the 8th grade student have the same RIT score in reading, then that test, they're testing at the same level in that subject. This stable scale allows educators to accurately measure each student's academic growth throughout a long period of time. A RIT score represents a point on a continuous scale of learning. It is similar to measuring a child's height on a yardstick. It tells us where a child is at a given point in time. However, like height, students' progress is rarely a steady growth rate. And for most students, it does not represent an incline over a period of time. Sometimes children go up and down the RIT scale, and so those two diagrams of getting from point A to B, being different, demonstrates that children have different learning styles and patterns in their learning. And we look at patterns over a period of time, and we look at those means within that area over academic years. MAP assessments serve the purpose of identifying learning patterns and identifying specific lessons that need to either be introduced or reviewed. So as a parent at Starwood Schools, you see the MAP goal worksheet. So I want to look at an example of this. This report is utilized by the guides as a tool to assist their students with goal setting in the classroom and to discuss expectations for learning. Please know this is not the only tool that we use for student goal setting. In fact, at Starwood Schools, we have learning outcomes, and within those learning outcomes, we have I can statements. I can statements are statements that the students monitor and manage for each developmental stage of their Montessori journey to help set their goal in the classroom. The bar graph on the left allows students to visualize their assessment scores over a school year. And to the right of those graphs, it gives a little more information numerically about areas of strength and areas they need to address. This report, as well as other data that's available to the guides in the NWEA site, provides information, or rather confirmation, to them about their internal classroom assessments and their observations that they're already making. It's a tool for communication with parents as well as administrators and other educators about a child's learning. So let's think back to where we started in this presentation when I asked you to think about your own experience with testing. Hopefully I've provided you some information that gives you insight about MAP and how it's different than your own experiences in testing. A MAP assessment is not a standardized test such as the STAR or other state-issued exam. It should be considered as data that can help students plan ahead and to set personal learning goals. Having conversations with your child about MAP scores is an opportunity for you as a parent to help build self-evaluation skills in your child and problem-solving skills, just as the guide does in the classroom utilizing the MAP goal worksheet. So let's talk a little bit about that, and I'll offer you some specific questions you can utilize. So when you talk to your children about MAP, you want to hear their input. So it's appropriate to ask them, how do you feel about your scores this school year? Many students are harder on themselves than what parents would even offer or what those expectations would be. Some children can be perfectionists and they put a lot of stress on themselves to always show increases in their RIT scores. So it's important that you ask this question and say, how do you feel about those scores? That doesn't mean as a parent you don't offer how you feel and you offer, well, I'm glad you shared that with me, but I'd like to let you know kind of what I'm thinking looking at these scores. So it's not that you don't share your opinions and your information, but it's good to hear from your child first and validate that they're very important in their own learning. Another great question is, there's something you'd like to do different next time or next school year? Listen to your child and hear what their ideas are. Let them propose some solutions. You can offer your feedback about their solutions and say, I think that's a great idea. I have another suggestion you might want to consider, or that might be really helpful to you. This is something I tried when I was in school. That's a great way to also talk to your children because they gain insight from your own experiences. So you can say, I remember when I was your age and someone told me that I wasn't very good in math, and so I had a lot of anxiety when it came to math. It's important that you don't have fixed mindsets and that you don't necessarily listen to adults telling you something when you know or you believe else, because it actually framed that I didn't do very well in math for a very long time in school. Share those experiences. It's important to share those with your children and come from that place of empathy. Another great way to support your child is to ask, is there a way I could provide further support? Summer reading is a great way to provide support to students. However, it can be a challenge if you're fighting with your child about reading a book versus playing video games. So find ways that it's engaging for your child and where you're helping them to gain some ownership and some autonomy, some input. You could suggest that let's pick out a book together that we want to read, and we'll both read it, and we'll have our own book club this summer. Reading books together with your children, and because they can read, right, and you don't necessarily need to read them to them, although that's still wonderful, you can both read the same book and have discussions about the plot and the characters. Sometimes you'll find that your child will share things about their social life or what they're feeling about emotionally or ways they relate to the character, and have conversations with you that they would not have had otherwise through the means of this book. So I really encourage you to find ways to role model to your children that reading is important and to engage in their learning. So if you need any more ideas of how to support your child, please reach out to me. Your guide is also a great resource, so please email them if you have any questions or you need some suggestions, particularly for the summer coming up. Thanks for your time today.